Hate it when my doubts and my fears swell up like the ocean. It feels like I could drown in my tears. Everything's overflowing. Scared that I won't get it right, get it right. My nerves are working overtime, overtime. Tell myself to calm down and breathe. Step out of the shadows into the fire. Don't be afraid to go out on a wire. Live in the moment, turn it up louder. This is what you're made for. You just gotta be fearless. You just gotta be fearless. You just gotta be fearless. You just gotta be F-E-A-R-L-E-S-S. Fearless. Once I get in and I put it in try, ain't no more stopping me, don't even try. Controlling the chaos, controlling the vibe. Yeah. That's all the shots that you don't take. You'll never be heard if you don't say. Just gotta get out your own way. You can't learn to fly on your own if you don't let go. Step out of the shadows into the fire. Don't be afraid to go out on a wire. Live in the moment, turn it up louder. This is what you're made for. You just gotta be fearless.
There he is, in all his glory, the boss dog. Heat index 110 degrees today, but we're out in the evening, so I don't think I'm killing the dog. It's cooled off quite a bit, but we had to get him out and get him some exercise. My sister-in-law, she's dead now, she used to call him baloney tongue. Let's get watching the world burn, July 4th, 2026. Happy 250th birthday. Hope you have a great 4th of July. I know I have. Let's, oh, by the way, what did you think of that video up front? By the way, you might have thought that was AI. That wasn't AI. I've verified that through multiple sources. And I tell you what, those are two crazy people. But the thing I was wondering was, how in the hell did they make that video? Unfortunately, they put the video to a song by Queen, which is copyrighted. So I had to adjust the music on to be able to show you the video. And I don't like doing that to artists, especially people that talented, because it's their choice, you know. But anyway, I just wanted you to know that I did alter the music for the video so that I could put it up without copyright. Let's get into the, well, actually, I always forget up front, hit that like button and subscribe. I am the Burn Report on YouTube and Telegram. I am also the Burn channel on Rumble and BitChute. And then, of course, I'm at that CyberSec guy on X. Those are all my platforms for now. So we got the first video I'm going to show you. Probably the biggest story of the week was Russia's taking the gloves off, and they're really pounding Ukraine right now. Reason I wanted to get this out of the way, I actually had some company the last couple of days. A friend of mine from North Carolina, and you know, the thing is, we did beg to differ on a lot of topics, but the thing is, he will discuss them with me, and we stay friends, and that's the way it should be. It's kind of like, you know, Congress. Okay, if congressmen have the Democrats and Republicans, let's say, although they're pretty much the uniparty at this point, but let's say they differ on an issue, you know, you can still pass legislation and take care. That's the way it used to be. there was some people that really, on Capitol Hill in my lifetime, they were 180 degrees opposite on certain issues, but yet they would go out and have a dinner together and be friends when they weren't debating on the Capitol Hill floor. And that's the way it should be. But yeah, let's start getting some videos out of the way. I've got, unfortunately, I'm just going off of, well, actually the first videos, we got footage of some of the stuff that was bombed in Kiev. The biggest story I thought was the hotel. There was a guy on Rick Sanchez, and he said there were a lot of young Ukrainians, let's say, and maybe of the opposite gender from me, don't want to get, that went into that hotel, because that's where a lot of NATO personnel and officers stayed. It was a 5-star hotel, and they came out very unhappy, according to him. That's all I'm going to say about it. You form your own analysis of what I'm talking about. So anyway, I don't know how many NATO personnel were killed in that strike. I've got the video footage along with some other footage. Let's just watch it all together. That way I don't have to sit here and divide up all the strikes on Kiev. I mean, I could literally show you, there's one video that's actually 7 minutes long of the strikes on Kiev. But let's watch that now.
Ебать, это 4-я нахуй! 5-я, блядь! Тупо взрывот Артема! Ебать! 6-ю слышу! Охуеть! Пизда нахуй!
نابود کرد نابود کرد
داره خودش میتونه
دیگه یکی من باهای نفت دارم.
All right, so we got the first story out of the way first. Then we got the Israeli war. I didn't see where I got the footage, but I'm sure I can find it. So if you didn't know, Israel dropped the mother of all bombs on Lebanon. And see, I'll tell you the 3 issues that me and my buddy disagree on. Number 1, he's a Zionist. He's all for what Israel is doing in Lebanon. He says they got no choice. They got to go in there and get Hezbollah. I said, well, yeah, but they don't have to take down apartment buildings in the Christian neighborhoods to get Hezbollah. You know, and then, of course, we'll argue back and forth. And, you know, he stands by he says, oh, well, Israel's just doing what they got to do. I said, well, yeah, but look at how many people they've killed in Gaza. All those women and children. Well, you know, they got to do that to get to Hamas. Hamas uses them as human shields. Okay, so we differ on that one. Then I get to Iran. I said, well, Iran, I mean, we attacked them. What did you expect? Well, they were developing a nuclear bomb. We had no choice. They're terrorists. They're the most awful people on the planet. The Iranians. I said, well, not on the videos I'm seeing. They're Persians, and they seem like nice people to me, for the most part. The government, that's a authoritarian, you know, Islamic government that, you know, just tortures their people. They killed 30,000 people the first day of less than Dutch, you know, and so he's leaving. all the propaganda. And then the fourth thing was Russia and Ukraine. And he goes, and by the way, this is a guy that's well informed. So you can imagine what most Americans think, and of course I'm willing to say, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm getting the wrong information. He goes, you're in your own echo chamber. You're in your own echo chamber. Maybe so. You never know. I think he's in the majority of the Americans' echo chamber. But what was it? He said, Ukraine's winning the war. Now this one I know he's wrong on. I said, you want to make a bet on that? he says, yeah, I'll make a bet, but I'm not going to bet money. Yeah, so he kind of knows in the back of his mind, I think, that Ukraine's about to be pushed out. Hey, I got a diagram here. Let me show you that now. All right, so I got the diagram up. Just wanted to show you this because right now Russia is about to take the last huge fortifications in the Donbass, I think in the Sumy region as well. If you didn't know, the Ukraine had built up the cities, it's just fortified fortresses. And that's why the Russians and the Ukrainians have been slugging it out so much, because it's hard to go, as usually the rule of thumb was you have to outnumber your enemy to go up against fortifications 3-1. And so that's why the Russians have been going so slow, because they don't want to take the casualties to go in there. So they've been slowly, methodically working their way through those defenses. And of course, it's the diagram. I'm leaving it up for a minute. So my understanding is once the Russians break through these final fortifications, they're off to the races. So they're going to sweep down, according to McGregor, through Kiev, take Kiev, and then go all the way and then take Odessa. That's what I'm hearing. Now, where they go from there, I don't know. It seems to me they're going to have to just keep slugging it out until Ukraine surrenders, or I should say NATO. It's mostly NATO at this point. I don't know how many Ukrainian men that can still pull off of the streets and throw them to the front lines. Okay, so let's get to the theme of the video before we get into some more videos. I wanted to talk about you don't have to be afraid. Because me and my buddy got into this argument. We were talking about the COVID thing. Let's watch a video right now by Anthony Fauci. About Anthony Fauci with Rand Paul. He's talking about him.
This was a conspiracy. This was a cover-up, and he has not really gotten his just desserts on this, and we want to make sure that the American public and that history records that he was involved with funding this dangerous research that led to a pandemic that killed 15 million people. There need to be repercussions.
Real time, uncensored, unstoppable. AlexJonesLive.com. Take a stand. Share the link.
You want to fight? You better believe you got one!
Let's go to that Rand Paul clip first. Here's Rand Paul talking about reissuing a subpoena to Anthony Fauci, hopefully holding him to account for being the world's greatest mass murderer. Let's watch.
Well, the investigation of COVID origins has been going on for several years. The Biden administration stymied us and wouldn't give us any of the documents. The Trump administration has been very cooperative, particularly Secretary Kennedy. They have turned over virtually everything. And what we now know beyond a reasonable doubt is that Anthony Fauci did indeed fund gain-of-function research. We have the evidence that the experiments were gaining in function. The viruses were becoming more lethal, more attachable to human cells, and more infectious. We do know that this was going on, that was funded by the NIH, specifically under the tutelage of Anthony Fauci. We know all of that, but we know even more now. We know that the initial estimate by the scientists at the CIA was that this came from the lab. They agreed with our supposition. But Anthony Fauci was able to coerce, cajole, persuade, and dangle money to get people in the intelligence community to change their vote. So a scientific commission within the CIA voted 6-1 to say it came from the lab. He somehow was able to get that change. We have evidence of that happening. The virologists that he handpicked that were big recipients of federal dollars, all of them initially were saying it looks like it was manipulated. The virus looks manipulated. He was able to convince them otherwise. We now have evidence that in January of 2020, that he was already acknowledging that the virus did not come from the wet market, that the wet market was a spreader event, but wasn't an initial event because we had lineages of people way before the wet market that were getting sick. Everyone acknowledged that, but for years he's been telling us it came from animals at the wet market. This was all misdirection. This was a conspiracy. This was a cover-up, and he has not really gotten his just desserts on this, and we want to make sure that the American public and that history records that he was involved with funding this dangerous research that led to a pandemic that killed 15 million people. There needs to be repercussions.
It's so unbelievably insane that Rand Paul is the only one that cares about this. It just hit me during that how crazy this is, because nothing he said there was speculation. None of it requires any faith or belief in Rand Paul himself. Like, this is all black and white evidence in their own words, with the attempt to cover it up, with, the email talking about the conspiracy, including the line like, you need to delete this email so it doesn't get found later. Like, it is undeniable. So my question, the thing that really struck me listening to Rand Paul right there, is what the hell is wrong with everybody who believed in COVID? What the hell is wrong with y'all? See, I never fell for it. I never masked up. I would wear a mask occasionally if I felt like it. But typically it was actually kind of enjoyed the lockdown, going into stores and just looking people in the eye as they tell you to wear a mask and just getting stuff off the shelf and paying. Never wore a mask, never locked down. Didn't take any boosters, wasn't rendered horribly sick because I took an injection that I didn't need. I didn't suffer from any of this stuff. You did. That was all because of Anthony Fauci covering it up his own complicity in the creation of the virus. Why do you not care about that?
Okay, so that's Rand Paul. Now, I showed my buddy the COVID video. That really upset him, because he did get the jab. And he said, but I had no choice. I had no choice. He says, and plus, back then we didn't know. I said, well, yeah, you knew it was an experimental vaccine. Here's another video for you. I hate to get back on the COVID theme for just 1 minute, but this is just a quickie by Tucker Carlson. And this really hit close to my heart. And we've talked about this in the past, but he's talking about how many nurses quit and didn't get the jab. And that's why the theme of the video is, you always have a choice. You got to stand up for what's right and do what's right. And let's watch that video from Tucker Carlson.
A lot of nurses are like, I'm not taking that. And they were fired for it. And they got fired. Public health officials in the United States who said, I can't in good conscience go along with something this evil. None. There are very few doctors who said that. There were some nurses. God bless them, because nurses tend to be kind of hard to control, in case you haven't noticed, which makes them very appealing, maybe. But whatever. If you talk to anyone who runs a hospital, they're always mad at the nurses because the nurses are expensive and they won't go along with everything. Because you make a nurse mad and she's like, oh. And that's hard if you're a hospital administrator, but the rest of us are really grateful for nurses because there are almost no doctors said a word. Some did, Mary Telly Bowden did, but not many. But a ton of nurses are like, I'm not taking that. And they were fired for it. And they got fired. Public health officials in the United States. Okay,
so he's talking about the nurses that quit. Now, I knew firsthand. I was in Charlottesville, Virginia with a broken neck in the hospital for, 3 months or so. And all the nurses, all the experienced nurses wouldn't get the jab. And so, they were being required to keep their job. They couldn't keep their job and not get the jab. So they quit or were fired, one or the other. So the staff that was taking care of me didn't know squat about nursing. I mean, these were young girls. I mean, it's too bad I was an invalid. They were good looking, but they didn't know what the hell they were doing. And oh my God, they tortured me because I didn't have any. There were a few older nurses, I guess, that got the jab, man, I would beg for them. I'd say, send that old nurse in here, please, God. You know, and they're like, well, we only got about 3 of them left. Everybody else quit. So you always have a choice. So you see what that choice was? You think that was easy for those nurses to quit their job on principle? Well, it wasn't on principle. They just knew that an experimental vaccine with no legal repercussions, and I guess they'd probably seen some of the results of the vaccine because they were probably injecting people. And so, you know, they made a choice. Am I going to save my health? But I lose my job? You know, imagine, back then though, jobs were pretty plentiful to come by, so I'm sure they could have come up with something else. And so I wanted to tell you how you can fight, because my buddy goes, he says, well, how did you expect me to be able to do anything? He says, you know, because he had to wear a mask to work. I said, well, you know, no, dude, you did what you had to do. You have to take care of your family. You know, sometimes you got to go along to get along. You know, I completely understand that. But you got to engineer your life so that you can fight back in some small way, and you got to know the repercussions. I'll give you a couple of examples. I used to be an active member of the Veterans Association in my community. Well, after the Afghan pullout, I went to the board, and I was upset, you know, because I had friends in Afghanistan. And I said, man, we got to make a statement as a veterans organization and condemn what Biden just did. Well, it's political. We're not going to do anything. Man, I slapped down on the table. I said, what are you, fucking cowards? I said, what do you think? What is a veteran organization supposed to do? And they threw me out. And I was never invited back to another meeting ever again. Now I overreacted. I'm going to admit, I didn't have to go that far. And there was a lot more words than that said. Because one of the guys was a Democrat. And I was just beating down him. I'm surprised I didn't get into a knuckle fight. So I lost all of those people. And then, of course, during COVID, I was telling people about, you know, COVID and how I didn't think the jab was a good idea, and, you know, and wearing masks. I didn't think, you know, a cloth mask was going to do much for you. And, you know, and of course those people didn't want anything to do it. So you can see I paid a price. So you got to decide how big a price you're going to pay. I'm going to take a break right here. Like, I had to get the dog some water. I see his bowl's empty. Hold on one second. All right, I know the next video that I wanted, I was just kind of going back through my notes on the way back here, was there was a European, and he was saying, you know, why don't we just get along with Russia?
Wir haben keine Steuergelder für Stellvertreterkriege übrig, die nicht in unserem Interesse sind. Das deutsche Volk will keinen Krieg und schon gar nicht gegen Russland. Wir fordern deshalb Friedrich Merz auf, Führungsstärke zu zeigen, die diesen Namen auch endlich verdient. Er sollte morgen unlängst einen Kurswechsel einleiten und den Impuls des europäischen Ratspräsidenten Antonio Costas aufnehmen, und zwar die diplomatischen Kanäle endlich zu öffnen. Wir brauchen eine neue europäische Stabilitätsordnung mit Russland als Partner. Dialog, Energiepartnerschaft und gute Beziehungen zu allen Staaten sind für Deutschland und Europa notwendig, und genau.
You know, they're on the same continent together. You know, it's kind of like we need to get along with Canada and Mexico, for example. You know, we really don't. We kind of bully them, but especially Trump. But anyway, so I just wanted to point things out. I mean, everybody's been engineered, just like my buddy, to hate the Russians, to hate the Iranians, to hate the Lebanese people, to hate the Palestinians. I mean, it's like a mind virus, and do it to their own detriment. You know, Europe, once upon a time, before we blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, they were getting very cheap gas out of Russia. You know, Russia wasn't messing with them. You know, they were selling them. In fact, they were buying European goods. They had a pretty good trade relationship and everything. I mean, I understand that Europe's a vassal of the United States, but, you know, why in the world? And then they wanted to poke the bear. So they put sanctions on Russia. Hell, we had entire companies that were doing business in the United States, had been doing business in Russia, making damn good money. And we just cut all that off. So what did the Russians do? Well, first off, they nationalized those businesses, because the corporations, I can't imagine how much money they lost. Like, I think Starbucks was over making a lot of money in Russia. and now it's a different name under a Russian company, because they had to abandon all their locations because of the sanctions. And of course, Europe now, they're paying 3 times, 4 times, well, especially with the Strait of Hormuz closed. I don't even know what they're paying for gas. I've heard that the government is telling people they can't run their air conditioning because there's a lack of fuel. And yet they had it made with Russia. And then why in the world would you want to go to war with Russia? They didn't want war. By the way, that was a topic I forgot to talk about, was the Minsk agreement. I was surprised my buddy, now I don't know if he was playing me, but he didn't know what the Minsk agreement was and everything like that. I wish I could find the video, maybe I will, of Angela Merkel. The Minsk Accord was basically a peace treaty because Ukraine was having a civil war, if you didn't know that. Okay, it was we took over Western Ukraine and installed a puppet government that represented NATO and not Ukraine. McCain and Victoria Nuland, if you want to go back in history, you can learn all about that. But anyway, so Ukraine, because we armed them to the teeth, they were trying to take back the western part of Ukraine. And of course, those are mostly Russian. And then, by the way, Ukraine banned Russian as the Russian language, and they banned the Orthodox Church, which is a Christian church. You would think that my buddy's a Christian, you'd think he would identify with the Russians, not the Ukrainians, because the Ukrainians, at least the government, they're atheists. In fact, they burnt down some of the Orthodox churches in Western Ukraine. You're forbidden to go to an Orthodox church. That's a Christian religion. Anyway, I'm sorry, I got off on a tangent. And so the Minsk Accords was supposed to be a peace agreement whereby Europe was going to look after the peace between Western Ukraine and Eastern Ukraine. And then Merkel comes out and says, we played Putin. We just did that so that we could buy some time so we could continue arming Ukraine before we attacked Russia, which is what they did. Well, I got a video here from the Vice President, Vance. And guess what? Sometimes the politicians slip up like Trump did. He says, you don't have to take down a whole hotel to get one person from Hezbollah to say the quiet part out loud to Israel. Well, this is Vance saying the quiet part out loud. I told you this memorandum of understanding was bullcrap. And Vance says it out loud. Let's watch that video now.
There are a few things that we want. We want durable commitments that are verifiable and backed up by inspections that Iran will denuclearize their entire country. Okay, we're going to see how we get there. Number 2, we want to see what kind of an arrangement actually exists in the Middle East between not just Iran and the United States, but the GCC, Israel, Lebanon. We're going to play that situation out. And then on the Strait of Hormuz, I think you actually said it well, which is that the strait is open in the sense that to oil traffic, we're seeing more oil come out of the Strait of Hormuz. And some days, actually, more oil coming out of the strait than came out before the war even started. So there's this element of the where the world oil economy is kind of getting back into gear. That's going to take a little bit of time, but you've already seen the prices come way down. Now, what the cynics will say is, well, if you look at the number of ships that are trafficking, that's actually down from the pre-war start, but they're mostly talking about cargo ships and other vessels. At least so far, what we've seen is the oil traffic has reached its pre-war height. So I think what the president has told us to do is use this MOU to sort of refill the world's oil economy, to refill some stocks, and then to see where the hand is. And, as I've said this repeatedly, if the Iranians are willing to make the commitments that we would like them to make and are willing to back those up with verifiable milestones, then we are going to change our relationship with Iran. And if they don't do that, then nothing has really changed except for what we've already accomplished from the military campaign, which is a lot. Right. So we kind of have two options here. We have the option of pursuing a long-term deal with the Iranians, but that requires a significant change in their behavior. We have the option of banking our wins, and then, of course, doing things on top of that if the president feels that we have to. And I think both of those options are very much in play, and the president's going to let this play out. But what's happening right now is he's letting those options play out in an environment where there is significantly less pressure on the world energy economy. And this is my biggest frustration with right-wing critics of what we've done over the last few months in Iran, is that they don't realize how completely they were losing the political argument because of what was happening to world energy markets.
Yeah.
So what the President of the United States has done...
You're talking about the critics who want more bombs dropping on.
Their attitude is just drop bombs and drop bombs and drop bombs, and they can't really articulate to what end. And what the President is saying, I'm willing to drop bombs, and he's clearly shown that he's willing to drop bombs, but only if it serves an objective. And so what he's doing right now is taking a lot of pressure off of the world economy, the world energy economy in particular, while not giving up a single one of his gains and while preserving a lot of optionality. I think that's a very good place for us to be in, but there's uncertainty because no one can be certain what the Iranians are going to do.
Sorry, I had to take a minute. Before I continue, I went back through my notes. Let's get a video out of the way of Tulsi Gabbard, where she's talking about the Russia hoax.
I'm going to go over the key findings from the House Intelligence Report, which investigated the claims that were made by an intelligence community assessment ordered by President Obama and published in January of 2017. First, Putin's principal interests relating to the 2016 election were to undermine faith in the U.S. democratic process, not show any preference of a certain candidate. In fact, this report shows Putin held back from leaking compromising material on Hillary Clinton prior to the election, instead planning to release it after the election to weaken what Moscow viewed as an inevitable Clinton presidency. In the January 2017 intelligence community assessment that President Obama ordered, John Brennan, who was CIA director at the time, and the intelligence community intentionally suppressed intelligence that showed Putin was saving the most damaging material that he had in his possession about Hillary Clinton until after her potential and likely victory. The report goes into great detail about the information that Russia and Putin had on Hillary Clinton, which included possible criminal acts like secret meetings with multiple named U.S. religious organizations in which State Department officials offered, in exchange for supporting Secretary Clinton's campaign for the presidency, significant increases in financing from the State Department. They also had documents that showed the patronage of the State Department to State Department employees who would go and support Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. There were high-level DNC emails that detailed evidence of Hillary's, quote, psycho-emotional problems, uncontrolled fits of anger, aggression, and cheerfulness, and that then Secretary Clinton was allegedly on a daily regimen of heavy tranquilizers. Then CIA Director Brennan and the intelligence community mischaracterized intelligence and relied on dubious substandard sources to create a contrived false narrative that Putin developed a quote-unquote clear preference for Trump. Brennan and the IC misled lawmakers by referencing the debunked Steele dossier to assess quote-unquote Russia's plans and intentions, falsely suggesting that this dossier had intelligence value when he knew that it was discredited. The intelligence community excluded significant intelligence and ignored or selectively quoted reliable intelligence that contradicted the intelligence community assessment's key findings on Putin's alleged support for Trump. Including this intelligence reporting would have exposed the ICA's claim as implausible, if not ridiculous. The intelligence community assessment omitted reliably sourced information, such as how some Russian intelligence officials were quote-unquote planning for candidate Hillary Clinton's victory, while others assessed neither Trump nor Clinton would respect Russia's interests. As was reflected in the ODNI documents that we released on Friday, multiple intelligence community assessments released in the months leading up to the November 2016 election concluded that Russia had neither the intent nor capability to impact the outcome of the U.S. election. On December 5th of 2016, the FBI and ODNI gave the House Intelligence Committee its first post-election classified briefing, in which there was no mention of Putin aspiring to elect Trump by either agency. The Presidential Daily Brief, drafted on December 8th of 2016, stated that no Russian or criminal actors impacted vote counts. This document was pulled just hours before it was to be published due to quote-unquote new guidance. If it had been published, it would have been briefed to both President Obama and President-elect Donald Trump. On December 9th, 2016, a National Security Council meeting was called to gather President Obama's senior national security officials, which included CIA Director Brennan, then Obama DNI James Clapper, Susan Rice, and others. Following that secret meeting, DNI Clapper's assistant sent an email to the intelligence community with the subject line, POTUS tasking on Russia election meddling, tasking ODNI leaders to create a new assessment per the president's request. The House Intelligence Committee Oversight Report that we released today reveals that, quote, unlike routine intelligence community analysis, the intelligence community assessment was a high-profile product ordered by the President Obama. It directed senior intelligence community agency heads and created an intelligence community assessment limited to just 5 analysts, using one principal drafter. This is not something that occurs in the normal path of producing an intelligence community assessment that reflects the views across the intelligence community. The production of this intelligence community assessment was subject to unusual directives directly from the President and senior political appointees, especially the former director of the CIA, John Brennan. The House Intelligence Committee Oversight Report also shows how later that same day, on December 9th, Brennan ordered the publication of quote-unquote substandard reporting on Russian activities, which had previously been withheld from publication of prior assessments because the information was judged, quote, to have not met long-standing publication standards. Some of the information later used in the Obama-ordered assessment over the objections of veteran CIA officers was, quote-unquote, unclear or from unknown sources. The Intelligence Committee's Oversight Report reveals that CIA Director Brennan overruled senior CIA officers who challenged the Obama-ordered intelligence assessment, stating, quote, we don't have direct information that Putin wanted to get Trump elected. Yet, the Obama-directed assessment was published on January 6, 2017, which explicitly stated, quote, we assess Putin and the Russian government aspired to help President-elect Trump's election chances when possible by discrediting Secretary Clinton and publicly contrasting her unfavorably to him, end of quote. The CIA and FBI, then led by John Brennan and James Comey, expressed high confidence in this judgment, while the NSA expressed moderate confidence. Yet, as the report we released today shows, the ICA, the Intelligence Community Assessment, did not cite any report where Putin indicated helping Trump win was an objective. The opposite is true. With regards to the Steele dossier, we now know that one of the source documents that the Obama administration used in the creation of this intelligence assessment in January of 2017 was none other than the discredited, unverified Steele dossier. The House Intel report states, quote, contradicting public claims by then CIA Director Brennan that the dossier was not in any way incorporated into this intelligence assessment. The dossier was referenced in the intelligence assessment's main body text and further detailed in a 2-page assessment annex. John Brennan lied, and he denied using this dossier in this intelligence assessment that President Obama ordered because he knew it was discredited. It was a politically motivated, manufactured document. He directed senior CIA officials to use it anyway. CIA officer told the House Intelligence Committee staff as they investigated this, quote, the director of the CIA, John Brennan, refused to remove it, and when confronted with the dossier's many flaws, responded, quote, yes, but doesn't it ring true? Even the bipartisan Senate Select Committee on Intelligence report published in 2020 criticized the FBI's handling of the Steele dossier, noting its completely unverified nature and purposeful sidestepping of intelligence community procedures in its use. Now, President Obama, Hillary Clinton, John Brennan, James Clapper, James Comey, and others, including their mouthpieces in the media, knowingly lied as they repeated the contrived narrative that was created in this January 2017 intelligence community assessment with high confidence as though it were fact. John Brennan, as CIA director, stated in a memo to his agency staff in December of 2016, saying, quote, there is strong consensus among us on the scope, nature, and intent of Russian interference in our presidential election. This was reported by NBC News, confirming that Brennan, along with James Clapper and James Comey, agreed with the CIA's assessment that Russia intervened to help Trump win the presidency. As Obama's Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper was tasked with overseeing the creation of this assessment in January of 2017 by President Obama, and he expressed confidence in its findings. In a 2018 interview with the Harvard Gazette, he talked about how he provided Trump with the same classified assessment that President Obama received, which included the high confidence judgment that Putin directly ordered the hacking and election interference. Clapper then went on to add, "I think they, the Russians, actually influenced the outcome." This is a brief summary of the details that you'll find within the House Majority Staff's report in their investigation into the Obama-directed January 2017 Intelligence Community Assessment. That leads us to the very same conclusion that we announced in the release of our documents on Friday. The implications of this are far-reaching and have to do with the integrity of our democratic republic. It has to do with an outgoing president taking action to manufacture intelligence, to undermine and usurp the will of the American people in that election, and launch what would be a years-long coup against the incoming President of the United States, Donald Trump.
She is my hero. Too bad she's no longer in the Trump administration. Trump got rid of her. You know, speaking of Trump, man, do you know how much money he made off of that Trump coin? I heard it was like $600 million. Who the hell would buy a Trump coin? I don't know. I can't say anything. I bought a Breeze-O-Matic, which was a ripoff, and then I bought some drones. I'll never buy anything that's advertised on YouTube ever again. I think I've talked about this in the past. I'll only buy from Amazon or Walmart, you know, any place that I can take it back. But, and then we got a video here with Marjorie Taylor Greene talking about President Trump. Let's watch that.
Actually, you know what? In my everyday life, him calling me a traitor has had zero effect because everyone knows the definition of a traitor. A traitor is someone that is working on behalf of a foreign country. And I would argue that's what Donald Trump has been doing with this war in Iran. He's been working on behalf of Israel, not America. This war has not helped Americans one single bit. As a matter of fact, it's cost Americans tens of billions of dollars, not only to their pocketbook, what they've had to pay at the gas pump and inflation, but also what it's costing them in the budget. Because here goes Congress having to spend hundreds of billions more because of his bombing campaign. So traitors work for foreign countries and not for the United States of America. Actually, Piers, I would say standing up to Donald Trump has been one of the best things I could do because I stood on the principle of defending victims of rape and pedophilia.
Okay, so let's get back to the theme of the video. You don't have to be afraid. If you can, like my buddy, he's engineered his life. So, and by the way, he worked about half the time. He's on vacation, but he's not on vacation. He had to log into work every single day. He was at my house, worked for about 2 or 3 hours. And then, of course, he was constantly looking at his email on the phone in case somebody had a problem where he worked. So he's on a leash, man. He's working 24/7, 7 days a week, you know, because he has to support his wife and the lifestyle that he's chosen. And so I wanted to get into that for just a minute. And you know what? He's happy. I'm not saying this is wrong, but I'm saying that if you were going to be able to make a stand in life, you have to engineer your life so that you can make a stand. Right now, he's engineered his life where he's a slave to that company. You know, so if he has health problems and something like that, and he has to give up that job, you know, I'm sure he's got some wherewithal. He could probably go 6 months, a year, maybe 2, and do just fine. But without that job, you know, he's living in a, huge house in an expensive area. He's got expensive tastes. I mean, one of the things that I do, even when I was making a lot of money, I've never made huge amounts of money, was I always lived I want to say, it's not a minimalist life, but a cheap life. So, and I didn't even know I was doing it, but he would go around the house and cut all the lights on. And of course, I'm just in the habit, I would go around behind him, I'd cut the lights off. Then he'd go around and he'd cut the lights back on. And so finally, he said something to me. I didn't even know I was doing it, really, to be honest, because it's just my habit. And he says, what are you, a vampire, man? He says, do you just like it dark in here? And I was like, well, no, not really. I mean, I just, if I don't need the light on, I mean, if I'm in the room, like a kitchen, I cut the light on. You know, when I'm out of the kitchen, I cut the light on. He says, well, I'll leave the lights on in my house. So you can see he doesn't live the lifestyle where you're trying to save money. You know, I mean, I don't want to gross you out, but I'll give you an example of how crazy I am. So if I go in and I use the bathroom and, the toilet doesn't look bad, I'll wait till I flush it because that's a whole gallon of water. And I'll wait till the next time I go to the bathroom and then I'll flush it down, once it gets dirty. Now, if it's dirty, it gets flushed. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to gross you out. I'm just talking like a little bit of pee that came out and you thought, you were going to pee a lot more, for example. I know, getting on the toilet talk. That's a taboo place to be. But I'm just giving you examples, and then, of course, rather than order out for pizza, I cook my pizzas at home. You can get a damn nice DiGiorno pizza at Walmart. And my buddy's like, he says, well, it's way too much trouble, man. You gotta wash the dishes and everything. I just order out from pizza. Well, right now, I don't know. The last time I checked, supreme pizzas at Little Caesars are like $17. They might be $20 now. I can get a Walmart pizza for $7, $9. Pretty good pizza. And then, of course, you buy some pepperoni and you get you some mozzarella shredded cheese and you load that up on there. Maybe you add some olives. You can deck out that pizza as a lot better. And man, to me, that's the way to go. It's not that damn much trouble to cook a pizza in the oven. Anyway, just getting off on a tangent. So what I'm saying is engineer your lifestyle. So if you're a single man or woman, and you're just being a nurse and you're not married yet, or you just got a girlfriend or boyfriend, live in a trailer, man. You don't need a house. Okay, now, I do understand you want a house for an asset. If you can afford a house and can pay the money up front without taking out a mortgage, well, by all means, do so, but get you a small house at first. You don't need a big house if you're by yourself or if it's just you and your boyfriend or your girlfriend, okay? Minimize your budget. You don't have to live in the most expensive neighborhood. You don't want to live in a neighborhood where you're going to get robbed, or it's dangerous to be out in the street, But engineer your life. Another one was like, look at the professions. You want to be a plumber? You want to be an electrician? That's an independent lifestyle. You're answerable at first when you're doing your apprenticeship. And I ain't going to say it, but as a young person, I mean, that's a tough job. I wouldn't want to be a plumber. I mean, but it pays extremely well. But I mean, and that's a tough job to do, especially when you're working for somebody. Because when you're apprenticing, it's just like in the military when you're a private. You're going to get all the crap work. I mean, so it's a lot more difficult. But once you get up in the years, you might get some people to open up your own business, and then you are just more or less a supervisor going along. You might have to jump in because you've got the experience, and they're doing something wrong, and then maybe do the project yourself occasionally. But and you're going to make a ton of money. And now, guess what? You can say what you want. And there's all kinds of ways to fight back. I mean, look at what's going on in Lebanon. They're still fighting. I mean, you saw the mother of all bombs. Well, maybe I didn't show you that video. Let's watch that again. Okay, I don't know how many people died in that explosion. It leveled an entire town, which I was telling my buddy. I said, don't you think that's a little overkill? Well, how else are they going to get the Hezbollah tunnels? Which was the excuse for destroying an entire village. God knows how many people died. But anyway, they're still fighting. Imagine you don't have a house no more. You don't have your bathroom. I mean, I always try to put myself in the shoes of another person. Without my house, I couldn't survive. I got all my medical stuff in my house. If I was out on the street, I wouldn't live very long. I can tell you that right now because I'm so crippled from breaking my neck. I need all my medical supplies. So imagine how many people are dying because they're on the streets, but they're still fighting. That's an extreme situation. But let's say, let's say you got a job where you don't want to get out on social media because they're monitoring, a lot of these companies monitor social media. So you got to be careful what you say. But you know what? If you're at a dinner and you're out with, some friends, and, nobody likes to talk politics, but you might just raise a little topic every now and then and say, this COVID thing, what do you think of that? And try to bridge the topic, and then see if you can steer them into to come around to your way of thinking if you think that you're right about things. And always keep an open mind. I mean, sometimes you're remember the Fonz on Happy Days? If you're an older person, I was he couldn't say he was wrong. All right, that's it for the video. We'll probably pick up on some things. It's going to get dark. Peace out. Stay free. Hope you enjoyed the video. Sorry I haven't gotten one up for a while. It's been my first. I got sick. Oh, by the way, at the end of this video, I've got a new song. It's up on all my channels. I'm going to tack it on to the end of this video. And it's Zach's theme we were talking about today. You don't have to be afraid. Let's watch that. Let's hear that song after my few clips that we had. Peace out. Stay free. Stay frosty. And follow me on The Burn and The Burn Report.
Окончательного освобождения Донбасса и Новороссии. Правда, в складывающейся ситуации мы не исключаем и возможности попыток со стороны ВСУ, неожиданных, как считает противник, неожиданных для нас, отвлекающих атак с ограниченными задачами силами спецподразделений и с целью отвлечения нашего внимания и наших сил от решения главной задачи – окончательного освобождения Донбасса и Новороссии. Правда, в складывающейся ситуации
This is the Burn Report. The headlines they don't want you to hear.
Those dodging big balls days are gone, my friend. We hoped Camelot would never end. But the neocons and deep state took over. Promises faded, the dream got colder. Then Trump fired Elon Musk, bowed down to the machine. Started talking tough, but the script stayed the same. War drums roll for Iran every night on the screen. Main streets empty, windows boarded tight. Another paycheck vanished overnight. Economy burning, no jobs left in sight. The dollar is dying, sanctions still flying, inflation's on fire, skies turning dire, precious metals calling, gold and silver falling into the safe while the empires are crawling. What hold does Netanyahu have on Trump? Why does Washington still bend? Every promise fades away as another war begins. Raise gas prices for the fight, all for the Holy Land's endless name. Lebanon wakes to another dawn, another town gone under a massive Israeli bomb. Bought the government with a crooked hand. Signed another paper, sealed another lie. Same old promises, we watch them justify. Zionists keep warring near and far. Logistics in the dust, classified numbers, truth we'll never trust. Bahrain burning, the damage runs deep. 13 dead, brother, that's what they want us to believe. Now the Ukraine war drags on year by year. Putin draws a harder line, no peace is near. Sersky warns the Russians plan a major thrust. McGregor sees them sweeping down Kiev, then Odessa in the dust. Black Sea for Ukraine is slipping farther away, while the deep state pours the fuel on another endless war zone.
Cut the strings, let the puppets fall. Hear the people break the walls. Every lie begins to fade. We were never meant to be afraid. People must wake up from their trance. Cut the strings, let the puppets fall. Hear the people break the walls. Every lie begins to fade. We were never meant to be afraid. People must wake up from their trance. The dawn is dying, hear the warning cry. Inflation burns beneath an empty sky. Gold and silver calling through the night, while the U.S. empire disappears from sight. Lines at the factory, factories shutting down. Bread lines growing while the bombs keep falling. We won't surrender, we won't kneel tonight. Truth keeps burning like a wildfire in the night. Raise your voices, let the silence break. No more fear, no more chains to make. The dawn is dying, hear the warning cry. Inflation burns beneath an empty sky. Gold and silver calling through the night, while the U.S. empire disappears from sight. Neocons whisper, deep state pulls the string. America first, that's just a slogan.